Sure did. Sure did.
It's buzzing at the planning commission.
Yeah.
You ready? Ready to go? Want to get going? Want to start? Okay. We will call to order the August 2015 City of Columbia Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to welcome to the Planning Commission all our members, staff, and guests. I would ask that everyone turn their cell phones and PDAs to the silent or vibrate mode. The clerk will now proceed with the roll call.
Mr. Stern?
Present.
Mr. Stiglmeyer?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Cohn?
Here.
Mr. Dinkins?
Here.
Ms. James? Mr. Waits? Here. And Mr. McDuffie?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. I would like to briefly review the meeting format. Applicants with requests before the Planning Commission are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time should include, but is not limited to, an overview of the project, case history, and any pertinent meetings held regarding the request. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant, such as attorneys, engineers, and architects. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the Planning Commission or staff regarding requests. Members of the general public are given the opportunity to address their concerns in intervals of 2 minutes. The clerk has a timer and will make presenters aware of when their time has expired. The Planning Commission reserves the right to amend these procedures on a case-by-case basis. The consent agenda. The Planning Commission uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion or vote. Examples of such items include approval of site plans, annexations, and street names. If a member of the Planning Commission or the general public would like to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The Planning Commission then approves the remaining consent agenda items. The clerk will now read the consent agenda.
The consent agenda this evening consists of the approval of the June 1st, 2015 minutes. Item number 2, 1030 Andrews Road, which is a annexation comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning map amendment. 2102 South Beltline Boulevard, which is also an annexation comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning map amendment. And 7011 Garner's Ferry Road, which is also an annexation comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning map amendment.
Do any commission members or guests today wish to have items on the consent agenda removed and placed on the regular agenda? If not, I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We will now proceed with the regular agenda, but prior to doing that, I would like to remind everyone when they come forward to please state their name clearly before speaking.
Before we move on to item number 5, I just wanted to note that for those who might be in the audience, items number 7, 8, and 11, which consist of 7 and 8, which is zoning map amendments, and number 11, which is a text amendment, the applicants have requested those items be deferred. So when we get to those items, just be aware of that particular change.
7, 8, and 11?
7, 8, and 11, correct.
Requested what?
They've been requested, the applicants have requested that those items be deferred. Then just of a point, we have items number 5 and 6. Number 5 is 121 and 201 Moore Hopkins Lane, and that item is a comprehensive plan map amendment. And you'll note on your agenda, number 6 is the same address, and it's a zoning map amendment. So what I would recommend is that the applicant is here, that at number 5, they can introduce the project, and then they can introduce the proposed changes, and then we can move forward with items 5 and 6 sequentially after that. So with that, I'll turn the first item over to the applicant to introduce their request.
Okay. Would the applicant come forward, please?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on items 5 and 6, I will need to recuse myself from discussion on this.
Okay. Mr. Waits needs to recuse himself on.
He's informed staff. We're aware. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Morris. There you go. My name is Gary Morris. I'm an attorney here in Columbia. I'm with Hainsworth Sinkler Boyd Law Firm, and I represent the applicant. Today, with me are 3 company officials from the applicant. Beside me is Greg Creswell, and we have 2 more in the audience. I have Blaine Garrett in the audience and Kristen Beckham. And what we'd like to do is have Greg make a short presentation, tell you what the project's about, what they anticipate, and then we can go on from there.
Thank you.
Evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Greg Cresswell. I am with Dominion Resources here on behalf of Dominion Carolina Gas Transmission. Dominion Carolina Gas Transmission oversees approximately 1,500 miles of pipeline throughout the state of South Carolina, as well as Georgia. We've been in the process of locating a corporate headquarters in the Columbia region. We have looked at approximately 25 sites throughout 3 counties, as well as the city of Columbia. This facility will serve as a hub for management, as well as senior management when traveling to the region, and it will also service as the operations center for our core operations. We have narrowed down from that original list of 25 sites to basically 5 sites, and are primarily focused on our number 1 choice, which is the site in question this evening that we're here to discuss at 121 and 201 Moore Hopkins Lane. Dominion Carolina Gas Transmission is excited about the opportunity to locate here in the city of Columbia. The location offers everything that we're looking for based on our brand, flexibility for growth, a changing operation, and all of our workforce requirements. We're hopeful to achieve a rezoning this evening, or to achieve a rezoning eventually for these properties, so that we can also achieve optimum efficiency with our operations by getting all operations within the same facility. We envision at the end of our product, after rezoning and renovation, a traditional flex product. In other words, we see an office-intensive operation with an industrial component. The building is currently 120,000 square feet. We envision approximately 65 to 70% of that building remaining office space, while converting approximately 20 to 25% of the building to warehouse. On top of that, we also see approximately 10% of the facility serving as a fabrication shop and a light assembly area for our pipeline products. We would also serve as a center for our field operations. Ideally, this portion of the facility would contain a storage component exterior, as well as a limited amount of product, small to mid-size earth-moving equipment, and service vehicles. While we understand tonight's meeting is not about the details of our operation, but is more about how a light industrial zoning on these specific properties would fit into the overall plan for the City of Columbia, as well as the makeup of this specific neighborhood, we felt it would be helpful to give you some insight as to our intended use. We are prepared this evening to answer questions that you might have to our best of our ability, whether it be now or whether it be at some point in the future. We thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Is this a new building or an existing building you plan to?
This is an existing facility. It's actually two properties. One is an existing building, approximately 120,000 square feet on 12 acres. And there's an adjacent 9-acre vacant, I say vacant, but a 9-acre undeveloped parcel.
Okay. Any questions from anyone on the commission?
What are your plans for the vacant parcel?
Currently, I'd say probably the best way to explain it is we're in discovery mode. We want to be certain that we're able to work in potential for expansion in the future, whether that be through an additional facility, additional parking, anything along those lines. So while I would say we are interested in the parcel, to the extent and what we would develop on it is still in discovery mode.
The company only has 4 acres of that 9-acre parcel that they'll be interested at this point. Only 4 of the acres are up for rezoning.
I guess,
And with that, though, I will note, staff is recommending for the comprehensive plan that both parcels change fully to the employment campus category.
I guess another way to ask the question is, what is the purpose or the intent of the rezoning request from C3 to M1? Because C3 seems to be a fairly broad zoning category. So.
Sure. We had initial conversations with folks in planning. Specifically, we spoke with Brian. Brian Cook helped us initially. Suggestion was based on our intended use and existing operation that it would make sense to try to rezone the property from C3 to, I believe it's the M1. I think it's intentionally, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps the exterior component that would require exterior storage.
Right. The combination of the outside storage and the, I guess, mechanical component of, they're working on, pipes and trucks and part of the building potentially. So that generally would not work in C3 zone.
So this is the mechanism then to allow what they want to do to happen.
That's correct.
Correct.
Brian or John, for that matter, have we heard from any of the neighboring property owners?
No, the property was posted, and we have not received any calls to my knowledge.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this, or from the audience? Okay.
Procedurally, one motion or two motions?
Procedurally, it'd probably be the quickest and cleanest if you just took one motion on number 5 and one motion on number 6.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Then I'd like to call for a motion on number 5, please.
Well, I think we're going to take them at the same time.
We're going to do both?
Sid,
No,
first.
one at a time.
You can do them together or you can do them separately. It might be quicker just not to have to figure out the
Understood.
language, just to do it two separate ones, but
So we'll ask for a motion on number 5 again.
I agree with them, and I think that this is certainly appropriate for this location, and I would like to make a motion that we approve the request to amend the future land use map for the property on Moore Hopkins Lane.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Number 5 passes. Now, I'd like to ask for a motion on number 6.
Mr. Chair, I'll follow that up with a motion to rezone the parcel on Moore Hopkins Lane from C3 to M1.
Do we have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Number 6 passes.
the next item is actually number 9, and just to remind you, number 7 and 8 have been requested to be deferred. Number 9 is 1,221 UG Street. It's a request of a major amendment to a PUDC in the DD Plan Development Commercial Design Development Overlay District. This request is to make modifications to an existing PUD that was approved many years ago. And I just also wanted to note that the executive summary for the traffic impact study has been placed in front of you, which became available earlier today. And with that, I'll also turn it over to Brian so he can address some of the requested changes.
All right. Is there, first of all, are there any questions from anyone on the commission?
Can
To
I just,
staff.
can I just state real quick procedurally that I've
You've got to recuse.
that,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
I'm recusing myself from this issue. Cox and Dinkins is heavily involved in this project.
I do have a question for staff. In your staff recommendation, there's some verbiage as it relates to some technical issues being resolved before a recommendation or action is taken. Are you suggesting this is deferred, or you want to take it up this meeting?
No, at the time that we composed the case summary, we were waiting on some additional information. Since then, we have received that information is satisfactory, and it was the revision that we handed out here that should be before you, the red line version, and it is, again, to our satisfaction. So.
Any further questions to staff? Do we have any, is the applicant here?
The applicant is here, and they can kind of probably run through the changes that they're requesting.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Robert Fuller. I'm an attorney here in Columbia representing Homes Urban of Greenville, South Carolina, and Russ Davis, its principal, who is here today. As has already been introduced to you, this is the amendment of an already approved planned unit development for the Klein property at the corner of Jervay and UG Streets in Columbia. Probably this item on the agenda has been long awaited because there have been various and sundry announcements about what might be utilized, what that property may be utilized for. But it is essentially a revision of the PUD plan that was adopted by City Council in 2006. There is a major component of the site layout that was changed from primarily office commercial use, and that building has been redesigned and redefined for a different purpose. Therefore, it is considered a major amendment to an existing PUD, which puts it back through the Planning Commission after a vetting process through the staff, and will go to a public hearing and go back to City Council for approval of the final revisions. Russ Davis is here to address any particulars of the plan or the changes to the plan. The engineers are here to address any site-specific considerations you may have. The traffic engineering study has been performed, and the engineers are available to address those matters if they are matters of concern to you at this particular point in the inquiry. But this is the matter is the amendment of the PUD plan that is for that development that has been considered and will yet be considered by the DDRC because it's in the design district. We have had meetings with the Vista Guild and the Vista Neighborhood Residents Organizations and have been received well by all of those considerations. There are questions which come up in particularity with various and sundry matters, but all of those things are moving and proceeding through the process. Mr. Davis can address any of the peculiarities and particularities of the plan itself as commissioners may have need of knowing.
Mr. Davis, I must say I have looked over the plan, and I think it's a wonderful addition to the city. My only concern is traffic, how you plan to handle 600 to 800 new cars.
Okay, can you put up the site plan? Okay. So we engaged Kimley Horn, traffic engineers, to do a study for us. Critical to our project is a traffic signal at what would be the intersection of Huger and Lady Street. Additionally, as part of our plan, we would be adding a second left turn lane on southbound Huger so that there would be 2 left turns onto Gervais. There would also be an additional lane that we would provide the land to then create a right-hand turn lane from Huger onto Gervais, heading west. Actually, I have my traffic engineer here. If it's helpful, have him walk through the recommendations he has made. Would you like to hear from my traffic engineer?
That'd be fine.
Yeah. Tony, you mind?
I'm Tony Shepard. I'm a senior transportation engineer with Kimley Horn and Associates. We were engaged to perform the traffic impact analysis for the site, as y'all have discussed. As many of you realize, the corridor of Huger Street, kind of one of the major traffic components is the intersection with Gervais. And within the study, in looking at the operation of the site, the signal that Mr. Davis spoke of at Huger and Lady was warranted based on trying to get the traffic out of the site. One of the unique components of this was having to do some work at the adjacent intersection of Huger and Gervais to clear the queuing that currently occurs that backs up through Lady Street. The recommendations based on clearing that queuing that primarily occurs in the morning is to install a dual left turn from Huger southbound onto Gervais westbound. Also providing a right turn lane from southbound Huger onto eastbound Gervais, and then also providing dual left movement from northbound Huger onto westbound Gervais. Basically, what we're doing with those modifications and with signal modifications to accommodate that lane configuration, we're actually, the analysis shows that the performance of the Huger-Gervais intersection will actually be better after build than it is in the current condition.
You said a dual left-hand turn from Huger to Gervais. That would actually be east, wouldn't it, back toward the Capitol?
Yes, sir. We would actually be putting them for both directions from Huger onto Gervais and actually both directions.
What would be the phasing of the traffic light there at Lady? When would that occur?
As far as the installation,
Is it approved, or has it been, how does that stand with the, I guess this is a highway department.
Yeah. Have they approved the traffic light?
we have submitted the traffic impact study that's before you to SCDOT and received approval from SCDOT with no comment on the study.
Have you got room to put all these turning lanes at Hughie Street on the Gervais?
Yes, sir. The unique thing about Hugh J. Street going southbound headed towards Gervais, you actually have 4 lanes in that direction. You have an existing left turn lane, 2 through lanes, and then a lane that honestly operates as a right turn lane because it only goes across Gervais and then it terminates. So by shifting the alignment of those lanes and adding, as Mr. Davis mentioned, providing the property to rebuild that right turn lane, you've got enough capacity in lanes in width to build those. And then you have to reflect that across the intersection, which gives enough room to build the other dual left turn lanes in the opposite direction.
So you won't have to widen UG any?
The widening will be done at the property for the right turn lane. There will have to be widening according to that.
Okay, that brings up another question I had. It's probably not in your area, but the existing sidewalks there are really narrow. When you develop this property, you're going to be hopefully putting a lot of pedestrians into that area. Are you going, you plan for widened sidewalks?
We will widen the sidewalks
Substantially, I would hope.
substantially. What's the minimum width there? What is 15? 10 feet.
210?
10 feet, yes. And so with respect to pedestrian, it's worth noting, with respect to pedestrian movement, we really believe that will occur at Lady Street. One of the reasons we wanted to signal at Lady Street was we thought it was a more comfortable pedestrian crossing than Gervais. So we will be adding the crosswalks there and the necessary signals to permit that as well.
I have a question for staff. Should the PUD be modified and the zoning is appropriate for the development, how does the traffic approval, particularly with DOT, play into them being able to pull in a building permit? Is there a requirement to get a building permit?
So once they actually change their zoning, their site plan review and design review would go to the DDRC.
Right.
And they would be looking at that from that the traffic at that perspective. So there can be a condition on the site plan approval that they meet all the requirements of the traffic study. And so if for some reason they weren't able to fulfill that, they'd have to come back and make revisions to their site plan.
Okay, so that would occur potentially at DDRC then?
Correct. And I believe the gentleman mentioned they did submit it to DOT and there were
Correct.
comments, so
Correct.
it should go forward smoothly.
Should, yeah.
It's probably about money at this point.
Yeah.
What was your, I know what was in here, the dates are a little old, I guess. Your buildings 3 and 4, what have you got?
Yeah, so effectively, this is really all designed to be constructed at once. Although there are different dates, the hotel can't begin construction until we make that portion of the site pad ready. That means you're getting them to grade, getting utilities to the edge of their site. So that would occur roughly 5 months after we start construction.
Okay.
But certainly while we're under construction, they too would be under construction.
You're not going to wait 5 or 10 years down the road?
No, sir. And then with respect to the other building, the building that sits at this, I would say the southwestern corner of Lady Street, extended through our site, and Hugh G, that's really just waiting on a user. And so when we identify who that ground floor user would be, then we would immediately proceed with the construction of that building. We are, in fact, financing for the entire project up front and would expect to build it under one contract.
Building 3 is just a future office building, or?
Could be office. More probably, it will be retail on the ground floor with 2 stories of residential above, another 20 units. It's a 16,000 square foot commercial space. And, my thought is that it probably ends up being retail. Could be a bank on the ground floor with a couple of floors of office above. We intend for that building to be lower just to create some varying heights along UG. That building will probably be just 3 stories.
I'd like to see a little taller, actually.
You're the second person.
The building on the corner, you're looking at what I've heard and read, you're looking at
90
feet,
90 feet.
which is about the height of the motel there where Ruth's Chris is. I keep forgetting the name. Hilton.
Hilton.
That's
Yes, sir.
what, 88 or so, yeah.
And while that's,
But you're going to drop down for these other, well, you drop down and back up. Well, that's.
yeah, the residential buildings are 5 and 6 stories. Residential retail buildings are 5 and 6 stories. The hotel will be 8, at 90 feet for them. And then the other building is intended to be lower. Actually, I've had other people suggest that they'd like to see it higher as well. The reduction in height at the corner from the previous approved plan had approved 118 feet. So we're lower than that by some 28 feet.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant?
I guess the last point I should make that's in my notes that someone had asked is this is decidedly conventional rental housing for full-time permanent households. Our business plan is not to build additional student housing. We don't rent by the bed, we don't furnish, and we won't accept parental guarantees, which is the critical factor for student housing, I think. So, make that point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other guests who want to speak on this, or is that? If not, I'd like to call for a motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval for the major amendment to the PUDC DD.
We have a second?
A second.
Any further discussion?
John, what the staff approved to recommend based on the conditions?
Yes, but all of the staff recommendations were actually in the final document that was handed out to you.
Does that need to be in the motion?
Well, it sounded like they were satisfied. That was part of the question.
Right, potentially you can make the motion conditioned upon submitted documents by the applicant today.
Okay. I'd like to amend my motion.
Remake the motion.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that we approve the major amendment to the PUDC DD with staff recommendations and documents included.
We have a second.
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Item number 10 is 315 South Maple Street. It is a request to rezone from the RS3 CC1, the single-family residential district community character, to the C1 office and institutional district. This request is to be able to convert the existing lodge into a duplex. And you'll note in your staff evaluation that staff is recommending denial for this particular case.
Is the applicant here?
Do you know if they're here? Ryan, do you know if they're here? I guess the applicant's not here.
Well, we've had this come before us before.
Yes,
haven't we?
yes,
For
we
the
have.
same reasons. And
Different applicant, but
different applicant,
correct.
but the same reason. Similar.
Similar.
So is there, and we've denied.
Yes. And the rationale staff has is that although and Brian might want to expand upon this, the residential use is allowed in the C3. It is not in the RS. The commercial district allows for a lot of other potential uses that may not necessarily be appropriate. So that's how we came to our
But
conclusion.
RS3 is resident. Isn't that residential?
The RS3 is, but it does not allow duplexes, correct?
What they actually want to do is take the lot and do a single-family attached, do a line down the middle. Because of the lot width and the district of RS3, they would not be able to meet that. So that's why they're requesting C1, so they could do that and split the lot.
Yeah, but C1 has so many different things that can become. So if we left it at RS3,
You
could we restrict it to the duplex?
If you left it RS1, you could do single-family on the home, single-family home on the property, and potentially, let me check my
But
use table real quick.
they're RS3 currently.
Yes, they are currently RS3. So, let me check one thing real quick.
When this came before us before, I thought I vaguely remembered, and I totally could be wrong, that it was a more intensive requested zoning.
Right, they came before with C3.
Requesting C3. So I just point that out. Rick, note that they're asking for a C1 this time as opposed to a C3 was what we were asked whenever that meeting was
Different applicant.
a few months ago. I realize that. But I think it was, I don't want us to be misleading. I think we had said that it was the exact same thing, and it's not.
All right, so generally what you're looking at is single-family home being permitted on that lot with RS3.
C1 would allow what else, Brian?
C1 would allow various uses to include individual and family social services, residential care. Some of these are with special exceptions. Various offices, physicians, attorneys' offices. Basically, you can get your light office use. Potentially, you could have a massage parlor is another example. One of the uses that you could potentially have,
My concern is that neighborhood right next to it.
with a special exception, a drinking place potentially in C1. Of course, it'd have to meet all the separation requirements from place of worship, but that is a use that's permitted in C1 with a special exception. So just a variety of office and service uses, and potentially, residential uses as well.
Although the applicant isn't here today, have they been interacting with staff a good bit? I mean, to come to the zoning, the city recommended the requested zoning change?
Right. They have been interacting with our staff, and the property was, properly posted to my knowledge. I don't know why they're not here today.
What other way could they accomplish this to avoid encroaching further into Shandon, like Rick stated? What else can we do?
As it is now, as the zoning is currently is, single-family home is about all you have. So, you could continue the lodge use that's been used in the neighborhood for, many years, but potentially if it hasn't been,
And it's not even conforming as is it, at RS3?
no, it's not.
So it's non-conforming as it sits today?
Potentially, parking aside, there are certain uses, other than, I said you're basically stuck with single-family home, but your religious organization would be a use that would be permitted as well, and again, that would be,
We have a guest. Would you like to step up to the podium?
Jesse Burke, Burke Engineering. I also live 1 block away. And yes, I was here 6 months ago when previous owner wanted to make the C1. The new owner is also one of my clients, so I'm I haven't had a chance to talk to him to let him know what he would like to do will not work from a code standpoint, building code. The right side of the building is within less than 3 feet of the property line. So no windows, no doors, no openings will be allowed in that side. The back side is similar. Splitting it down the middle to make a duplex, there would have to be a firewall separating the two. Each side has to be structurally independent. It has bowstring trusses that bear on pillars in the walls on opposing sides. So it can't be split down the middle to make a duplex. It could be split the other direction, but it gets a little odd in how you handle the property. As far as allowing duplexes, RG or RD zoning would allow duplexes. But how they would split the property, that's a different story. The minimum lot width is the issue. C1 does not have a minimum lot width where all the other Rs, the minimum is 50 feet. This lot's 80 feet wide, 140 foot deep. But splitting that into a duplex, as is originally envisioned, will not work from a building code standpoint.
When you look at the picture, it appears that the building looks like it's over the line in the back.
It's probably just the angle that the map is showing. It's going to be a little off at that angle.
So as it's zoned now, they cannot put a duplex there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion?
I wish there was a way to accomplish this without changing the zoning to C1.
I mean, I agree, because the issue isn't residential, correct? I mean, if it was a residential use here, even a duplex, you guys wouldn't be opposed, just the fact that this zoning allows for other uses if this residential piece doesn't work, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'm Ron Burns, and here to represent the Shandon Neighborhood Council. And we've discussed this, and we've heard at least descriptions of some plans to subdivide this into 2 attached homes. Our consideration here is objection to commercial zoning of this, currently residentially zoned thing, which is, of course, right at the edge of our neighborhood. And as we opposed the C3 just a few months ago, we'd be opposed to the C1. Certainly at this point, there don't seem to be any workable plans for what would be done with this building. Perhaps deferral would be the best move, but we would oppose just a naked C1 rezoning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the current use of the building? Is it being utilized now, or is it vacant? I mean, I know it's
Yeah, I believe it's vacant. Right. It was a lodge. I believe it's vacant now, it's my understanding.
So the applicant's idea was to use the building that's there and create
A duplex.
2 living units, or tear it down?
It's my understanding they're going to use the building that was there, but that's, I didn't get that from the applicant, but that's what I heard.
So if the building's out of service, it can't be put back in service without a business license that's appropriate for the zoning, is that correct?
Depends on how long it's been vacant or abandoned. If they've been closed for more than a year, they're kind of back to, losing the non-conforming status, and you're looking at any use that would work in, your RS zoning, which, again, daycare, religious organizations, residential care. There's several other uses that have potential in RS zoning, but they're pretty limited. Some civic uses would work, but if they wanted to establish another lodge there, it's been closed more than a year, they may run into some issues.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Any further questions for staff? I'd like to call for a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to deny the rezoning request for 315 South Maple Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of denying, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion's denied.
May I be recognized?
Yes, Toby.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Toby Ward, and I'm an attorney here in Columbia, And with me today is David Guthrie, who's a representative of Aspen Heights. And we deferred our request, talking extensively with the neighborhood, and they actually like our request on some level to go to MX2 because it gives them some leverage with us. And we've done a good bit of design work to accommodate the neighborhood concerns. And then finally, there's the staff recommendation, which looks at the Innovista development plan, and they say it really that this area, which is, as I like to say, it's near 701 Whaley, maybe from staff's perspective on the wrong side of the track because it's on the south side of that railroad line. But it's this employment campus area, which is a relatively new thing, and whereas it calls for the city to strive to get research and development and light industrial in there, it does also open the door for residential because that same designation talks about multifamily residential. Now, granted, we would have a student housing project. So with all those issues, with the timing and this plan we couldn't get hold of and this relatively new design overlay that we really haven't had much experience with, we want to defer, but understand that we're working diligently to resolve these issues and bring this $60 million project into Columbia because we think the tax base would be benefited by that. And so I appreciate your patience in letting me give you a little bit of explanation of the reason for the deferral, and I hope you all have a great evening.
We'll see you again.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I think we have one more item, John. Or is that it?
Just as to note, number 11 was the text amendment that was deferred.
Oh, that's,
And with that, we have just an adjournment.
if, second?
Second.
Meeting's adjourned.